Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday edition of Beyond the Darkness. I'm Tim Dennis, sitting in for Dave Schrader. Dave is now officially back in the country. However, we're getting ready for Michigan Paracon. That's coming up this weekend. If you don't know how to get your tickets, and there's just a few left, it's at Keewatin Casinos in Upper Michigan, in the UP, the UPA. So you can get your tickets at darknessevents.com. You just click on the banner, follow it. It'll take you to where you can purchase your tickets for Michigan Paracon. And we're looking forward to seeing you this weekend. Myself and Dave, it's one of the only times this year that we'll both be at the same event. The other one being Chicago Ghost Conference. And you can find tickets for that as well on darknessevents.com. One other event I should mention, Dave just getting back from England, is going back to England in September, and there are precious few spots available, I think only 2 or 3 maybe, to join him in England. A couple of people dropped out, and it's your fortune. Their misfortune is your fortune if you want to join him in England, and he had a wonderful time. We're going to hear all about it next week. If you want to join him in England, darknessevents.com. Click on the banner. Get in there now. You got a chance, folks. You got a chance to go to England this year and experience everything paranormal about England. Man, did he have a good time. If you don't know, you need to know. Follow him on social media. You can do that by going to darknessradio.com. Take a look at his picture. All of his links are there. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And take a look at some of the experiences Dave had out there. See it all in pictures. And you'll hear about it next week here on Beyond the Darkness. Got a good show today. We're going to join our guest now. I tell you, this is a subject that we've broached before in the past, but this is a little bit of a different spin. And we want to bring our guest on to tell you a little bit about it. Bruce Gernon lives in South Florida on the edge of the Bermuda Triangle. Bruce is a pilot who has flown extensively in the Caribbean. He has appeared in many documentaries about the Bermuda Triangle, and today he's got a book out called Beyond the Bermuda Triangle with Rob McGregor, True Encounters with Electronic Fog, Missing Aircraft, and Time Warps. And we're going to get into some high strangeness today, folks. It's going to be a good program, and I can't wait to get into this. Bruce, welcome to the program. How are you?
Hey, Tim. Hey, great. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for being with us. It's interesting to me. I've always had a fascination with flying, and with the ability to take off from the ground. In fact, a lot of people say I would never make my first experience off the ground in a small plane. My first experience was actually in a helicopter with no doors, and my second one was in a Cessna, a small plane. I didn't start out on a commercial airliner like most people did. I got to know, as far as you're concerned, Bruce, what was your first fascination with flight, and when was the first time you flew, and how did you fall in love with flying?
Well, when I was a kid, I always enjoyed playing with wooden airplanes, and then propeller, rubber van-powered planes, and then planes with small gasoline engines. Never really quite got into remote control until later in life, and then I went to high school and didn't do too much flying. But then my dad, he was a pilot, not a high time pilot though, but he loved aviation, so he kind of pushed me into getting my pilot's license, and that's when it all really started in 1965. When I was 17, I started taking flying lessons in the small plane like you were talking about, a little Cessna 150.
Now, with that being said, and you taking those lessons, I got to get your first impression as you get up into the sky. It's a whole new world up there. It's a whole different atmosphere. The first time you see something that's a little strange, do you recall when that was? Was it right away when you started flying, or did it take a while before you saw something you couldn't quite explain?
Oh, yeah, it took quite a while. I started in '65, so it was in December 1970 when I had this experience. And so the first really strange thing I saw was just 2 weeks before I had this encounter in what's known as the Bermuda Triangle, and that was flying over South Florida with my dad. The two of us were flying back home after a day of work out in the middle of the state where we were developing a subdivision. And it was afternoon in the summer, so there were a lot of thunderstorms everywhere, scattered around, and there were rainbows. We saw a lot of rainbows, which is not that unusual, but sometimes you get to see a rainbow that is a full circle when you're in an airplane, and we saw a few of them while we were flying, and that was pretty cool. But then an incredible thing happened. We encountered a rainbow that was not below us, and the circle that it formed was right in front of us. And instead of laying down below us horizontally, it was a vertical shape. In position, it was vertically. And we flew right through the center of this rainbow, and it took close to a minute to fly through it. And it was pretty incredible. We both were amazed at what we were witnessing as we slowly passed through this ring that went all around the airplane, and then we passed beyond it, and it was like a kaleidoscope of incredible, beautiful neon colors all around us.
That's very cool. Now, your dad had been flying for quite a while. Did he have an explanation for you as to what it was right away, or was he kind of in wonderment himself?
No one's ever really explained that, but recently I was exploring the internet, and I Googled flying through rainbow, and two videos came up. One was on an airliner, and apparently they did it, and so they had a cell phone video, but it was being shot out of the window, so you only got to see only maybe 1/3 of the rainbow as the jet slowly passed through it, just like we did. And then there was another video with two young men flying a plane like ours, and they got a really good video because they were able to take their cell phone and aim it out the front windshield, and so it showed the plane slowly passing through a rainbow. And that I saw that just it's been a couple of years ago, I think, but so that it's not impossible. Because I always thought it was so hard to explain, people wouldn't believe it. But now you can see it on the internet. It is possible to fly through a rainbow. And then just a couple of years ago, I was up with my grandson. He's only like 7 years old, and we were getting ready to land here in South Florida, and we encountered a rainbow on the edge of a thunderstorm, and we got to fly through it. It wasn't quite a full circle, but it was like maybe 2/3 or half of a circle anyway, vertical too. So that was pretty cool that my grandson got to see that beautiful rainbow too.
I tell you, it's one of those things where you stand on the ground and you look up at a rainbow and you can appreciate its beauty from there, but then to actually pass through one has got to be kind of a surreal experience, isn't it?
It's very surreal, and I always thought it had something to do with my encounter in the Bermuda Triangle because it happened just 2 weeks before we had that experience.
Well, tell me a little bit about that experience. Let's make that transition. Set the scene for me a little bit about that day. How does that day start out?
Well, it started out, we were in Andros Island in the Bahamas, and that's the largest of all the Bahama Islands. And we were at an airport there called Fresh Creek, which is 215 miles from our home base, which was Palm Beach International Airport. And we had spent a couple days there working on a development project. And it was like a Friday morning, and we were planning on leaving early to head back to Palm Beach. And that's where the naval base Autec is located, right there on what's called the tongue of the ocean, sort of a mysterious area of very deep water where they secretly test submarines there. And it was raining morning and quite stormy, and so we had to wait. And there were no radios on Andros Island in 1970, and or there may have been radios, but they don't reach very far, and so there were no telephones, so we couldn't get any weather reports. And, but we've looked up weather reports in modern times, and there's an area of large thunderstorms was going on that date of December 4th of 1970, and the storms were only over the mainland of Andros Island, and it was clear all around there. But of course, we didn't know that, or we could have taken a shot out over the clear area. But we waited, and then it started letting up finally, and we were able to take off at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. And so we kept real close track of time back then as part of the navigation procedures. And we departed at exactly 3 p.m. We lifted off. And so we climbed up to only 1,000 feet because it was overcast at 1,500. And it was a slight light mist. And we went at our maneuvering speed at 180 miles an hour for 10 minutes as we picked up some radio beacons and navigational beacons on Bimini. So we were planning on flying direct to Bimini from Andros.
Mm-hmm.
And when we reached the western shore of Andros Island, that's where the Great Bahama Bank starts. It's a huge area of shallow water, only about 10 feet deep on an average. And it was clear there. The storms appeared to be only over Andros. And so that was a good sign. And so I was able to start climbing up to our designated altitude of 10,500 feet. When we got right offshore, I noticed there was this strange cloud that seemed to be hovering about 500 feet above the ocean, and it was about a mile long and a half mile wide, 1,000 feet thick, and it had very smooth edges on it, and it was lenticular shaped. I thought it was a lenticular cloud at the time. And they don't form very often in Florida, but when they do, they're usually up around 20,000 feet. And this was only 500 feet, so at the time I really didn't have time to think about how unusual that was, because I'm busy trying to fly the airplane.
Right.
And starting my climb up, and it's directly in my flight path. And so it looked quite harmless, so I didn't deviate at all. I just climbed up and over it. And then when I started gaining enough altitude and getting above it, I was able to contact what's called Miami radio. Pilots have to be in contact with them to fly back into Florida. And so I was able to contact them, and I filed my flight plan, which takes a couple minutes or so. So I wasn't paying attention to the cloud that was below us. And then when I signed off with them, well, first they told me the weather was great in between Andros and South Florida, all clear. And there were some large scattered thunderstorms over South Florida, but he said I could probably circumnavigate them, no problem, to get to Palm Beach. So I look around me, and here's this little cloud that we had climbed over, and now it's spread out all around the airplane. And then it catches up to us. And now I'm like at 5,000 feet, and it catches up to us, and we go inside the cloud. And visibility was real low, maybe only 50 feet or something. And it apparently had strong updrafts as it was going up. And I'm climbing at 1,000 feet per minute, and it's climbing a little bit faster than that. And so I broke free of the cloud, and I'd get a couple hundred feet above it, thinking I'm okay now, and then 30 seconds later it'd catch up to me again, and I go back in it. And so this went on back and forth 4 or 5 times as we're climbing up, and then when we got to our designated altitude, 10,500 feet, it's still doing it. So my dad says, well, maybe we better turn around and go back to Andros, make a 180 turn. And I didn't think that was a good idea. You know, I thought that we had been somehow happened to fly over the birth stage of a cumulonimbus thunderstorm, and it was building up, which isn't all that unusual for them to build up at 1,000 feet a minute.
Okay.
And we'd probably be able to break free of it pretty soon. So, besides, I didn't want to turn around and go back into the heart of this storm.
Right.
And so, fortunately, at 11,500 feet, we break free, and I live off the airplane, start cruising at almost 200 miles an hour, and I look around on either side of me, and I couldn't believe it. This little lenticular cloud had spread out into what appeared to be a huge squall. And I could see like 10 miles in either direction, so that's a total of 20 miles either way, and it was on both sides of it. And I noticed it was kind of strange because it was semicircular shaped. It seemed to have a real curve of like a half a circle as far as I could see, and it was behind us. So I put it out of my mind and tried to relax and enjoy the flight back to Florida. So now 20 minutes have passed, and we're cruising along, and then only a few minutes pass, and I look in front of me, and now there's the same type of storm, but now it's just in the opposite shape right in front of me. And the one that I had just left behind me had built up to like 20,000 feet. You know, at the time, I didn't think of this either. I mean, I'm climbing and going forward at 105 miles an hour, and this storm, it was spreading out faster than that, horizontally, which is very, very unusual.
Right.
And now I look at it, and it's over 40,000 feet, and it's in front of me. So I can't climb over it, and so I think, well, I'll go under it. And then I noticed that it's laying right on the surface of the ocean, another unusual thing. It had no ceiling to it, no cloud base, or there wasn't any rain coming on the bottom of it. And so I'm on the instruments flying direct to Bimini, so I stayed on that course and penetrated into the storm. And then when I got in it, the visibility, it was kind of weird. It was the visibility appeared to be good, but, I mean, I could see the ocean, but I'm 2 miles high.
Now, Bruce, what kind of danger is there at this point when you decide to take this course of action? When you decide you're going to penetrate the storm and try to fly under what you believe is to be a ceiling here? I mean, obviously you've got instruments in front of you that are going to guide you, but what you're flying into what you believe is just a thunderstorm, but at the same time, what kind of chances are you taking by going at a lower altitude?
Well, no, I was still at 11,500 feet.
Right.
When I penetrated, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'd be taking a big chance, but I thought I didn't want to change my course direct to Bimini until I was sure I had a problem. And the problem was the electricity that was going on inside this cloud, this squall. It was very intense. And it was like flashing. I didn't see any lightning bolts, though. the deeper I penetrated, the more intense they became and the brighter they became. And the darker the clouds got, and the brighter it looked when they were flashing on with electricity. And so I said, well, this is not good. So I made a sharp turn to the left, heading due south. And I popped back out of the cloud. And then I contacted Miami Radio, and I told them that I had deviated from my flight path, which was direct to Bimini, then supposed to be direct to Palm Beach. And they said, oh, no big deal. I told them there was some sort of squall, and I was going to see if I could fly around it. And they said, fine, contact them after I fly around it. So I start heading south along the edge of the storm, and I notice that the storm continues to curve back, and apparently it must connect to the storm that we had just exited. And so now I'm realizing that we're trapped inside this huge donut-shaped storm, which would be like around 40 miles in diameter on the inside, and the clear opening in the middle around 20 miles. And then I'm looking for a way to get around this, and then I see something unusual where the storm had connected down below, right above the surface. And there was a gap in between the two storms, like a big valley. And so apparently the storm had formed off of Andros, 40 miles or 30 miles back from us, and it had spread out in the shape of a semicircle and then connected on the opposite end where I was looking at. And if that's the case, it would be spreading out at around 300 miles an hour. But that would not be like a wind speed. That would be like an ignition. The whole thing just ignited and connected on the opposite end. So opposite end, the valley was opening with clear blue sky on the other side, and that would be aiming right toward Miami. So I figured, well, we'll go through that, and then we'll be all clear. And then I turned the airplane heading of like 290 degrees and direct toward Miami. And I noticed that we were about 100 miles. We did a navigational check, 100 miles east of Miami. And I started to dive down because I noticed the tunnel, it had formed a tunnel. It was like two anvil heads formed on each end of the squalls. And I've got some photos in my book, my new book, Beyond the Bermuda Triangle, that I took in the late 70s over the Everglades, where I had another experience with this phenomenon. And it can happen over the Everglades, too. And the photo shows how the two anvil heads can connect. And there's two photos, and they're taken about 2 minutes apart, so it shows how they move together and connect. And that's exactly what happened in this case. And I noticed it was rapidly getting smaller. The first was like a mile wide and about 10. And it should have taken me about 3 minutes to fly through that. And so I dove down to the center of it, went at full power, full speed, and noticed it was getting smaller. But when I entered it, it was probably 700 or 800 feet in diameter. And once I penetrated it, something incredible happened. These lines formed instantly on the penetration of the aircraft. And I think what I was seeing was the fabric of time. Somehow time is affected inside tunnels, yeah.
The fabric of time.
Yeah. I was physically seeing time.
How did you discern at that point that it was the fabric of time you were looking at, or was it later that you figured this out?
Oh, yeah, it was much later. It was over a year later. It took me a whole year before I even started telling anybody about this because it was unexplainable.
So
but then when I
describe to me, other than these lines, what did it look like? What were the colors you were seeing, or what exactly did you see?
Well, it's 3:30 in the afternoon, so the storm had like a silvery lining on the edges of the storm up high. And then the tunnel also was picking up that silvery glow on the edges, the surface of the tunnel. And it was fairly smooth when I was outside the tunnel. It looked smooth, but then instantly upon entering the tunnel, these clouds formed. They were about the size of a bus, a school bus, or a Volkswagen bus. They weren't all exactly the same size, and they were separated by maybe 30 feet or so, 20 feet. But they were all in a line, but the line swirled around the tunnel. And they were rotating slowly counterclockwise, all the way from the beginning of the tunnel to the end of the tunnel. So, yeah, I mean, I didn't have time to think about it. You know, when you're in a situation like this, the only thing you should think about is flying the airplane. So
right.
I had to concentrate on the other end of the tunnel because it was rapidly closing. And it should have taken me 3 minutes to reach the other end of the tunnel, but because time was being affected here, it only took like 20 seconds to reach the other end. And when I reached it, it was down to only about 30 feet in diameter. And when I looked behind me after I exited, the wingtips scraped the edges of it, and like contrails formed on the wingtips, and the tunnel formed like a slit, which kept rotating clockwise now because I'm looking at it from the other end. And the clear blue sky that I was aiming for instantly disappeared. And that's where what I call electronic fog captured the airplane. And of course, I didn't know that this was happening at the time, and it took me 30 years to understand how this electronic fog works. Because it was clear blue sky, and then instantly it turns gray. And it's like fuzzy gray. It's like an electronic gray. It's like looking at a black and white television that's totally out of tune, and all you got is a screen with that fuzz, black, gray, and white fuzz.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it had, a bit of yellow tint to it also, kind of like an eggnog. Some pilot, a famous pilot, explained once that he was in it, Martin. And I also had this sensation that I've only felt once, and it was an incredible sensation of zero gravity as this electronic fog attached itself to the airplane. I didn't know that was happening then, but it also felt like I was hydroplaning, like I was skidding forward somehow along with the zero gravity. So it's a very strange feeling that I've only felt the one time. I've felt zero gravity many times, but not with the hydroplaning combination.
Did you notice at that point, Bruce, that with that hydroplaning sensation that there was any lack of propulsion by the plane?
No, well, it would have been just the opposite. I felt like we were going faster than normal, but I couldn't see that we were going faster. And that was another hard thing to explain. I wasn't sure if I could see the ocean below me or not because it was kind of fuzzy. And then no horizon and no sky. And then I noticed my instruments weren't working. My dad couldn't figure out where we were. And so I contacted Miami Radio. I was able to get him, and I told him, can't remember exactly what I told him. I told him I was like 90 miles east of Miami, first off, in my altitude. And but they must have realized something was wrong. And so they tried to find me on radar, and they couldn't find me on radar. And so I told them, okay, well, I'll just keep flying. We were doing all right. But my dad went into a state of panic at this time, and my passenger, our business partner, he became nauseous. Or I don't know how to explain it. His words were all muffled. And it reminds me of a dear friend that worked for me many years. When he was dying, he wanted to talk to me, and they put him on the phone, and he was talking like that. Not one word made any sense, and he kept talking like that. And so that's what this guy was doing. He was trying to help me, but he couldn't pronounce words. And so I had to totally disregard him because he was causing a distraction, which you don't want when you're concentrating on the airplane flying.
Right.
And so then another incredible thing happens. Looking forward, and these lines form parallel to the direction of flight of the airplane, and they're all around the airplane. And they appeared to be several miles long, but I later realized that is an illusion. That part of the thing that took me 30 years to figure out. The lines cracked open, and then I could see through the cracks there was blue sky on the other side. And then it took about 10 seconds for the cracks to keep spreading out until eventually the fog was completely gone. I call it an electronic dissipation. It instantly, over a 10-second period, disappeared. And I looked back expecting to see this huge fog bank, and it was crystal clear skies. No fog anywhere. And
weird.
I told the radar controller, he was right. Yeah, I'm directly over Miami Beach at 10,000 feet. So then I signed off and went to Palm Beach, and I had to go way out west of Palm Beach to get in between these two large thunderstorms that were in our path. And another kind of unusual thing happened. I had to go all the way from 10,000 feet down to 500 feet to fly under, which was like a bridge that connected the two storms together out over the Everglades. So then I go back and I fly to Palm Beach International. I land, and when I landed, I look at my watch, and it's the time is 3:47 p.m. And it's like, what? No, wait a minute, that can't be. I'd made this flight a dozen times or more. It always took like an hour and 20 minutes on average. So somehow there was like 30 minutes were missing somehow. And I also realized that I had just experienced a phenomenon that someday would be important for the entire world to know about. So it was at that point I committed it to memory and worked on that every day for quite a few years to make like a permanent memory of every detail in the flight.
Wow. That's one heck of an experience. I tell you that, Bruce. I tell you what, at this point, let's take a break. And when we come back, let's unveil exactly how you started to realize what it was that you encountered on that day and the details of how you discovered what it was that you were encountering on that day. Our guest is Bruce Gernon. The book is Beyond the Bermuda Triangle. It's written with Rob McGregor. True Encounters with Electronic Fog, Missing Aircraft, and Time Warps. Available at Amazon.com and available at BarnesandNoble.com as well?
Yes, it's available at both. And they just came out with an audio book. They just bought the rights to create an audio book, and I hear already that it's really exciting to listen to.
Excellent. And electronicfog.com is also Bruce's website. Be sure to check it out here as well. When we come back, we'll talk to Bruce about how he discovered the details of what exactly he was submersed in and other interesting details about what exactly he discovered up there in the skies.
Beyond the darkness.
Welcome back. It's Beyond the Darkness, and I'm Tim Dennis filling in for Dave Schrader, who will be back next week. Our guest is Bruce Gernon, and the book, which is out right now, is Beyond the Bermuda Triangle, True Encounters with Electronic Fog, Missing Aircraft, and Time Warps. And we just found out a little bit, or more than a little bit, a lot about Bruce's experience up there in the skies. Now, before we get back to this, Bruce, I want to ask you this question, and this is kind of what's been burning in my head a little bit. Before you got up into the skies, obviously every pilot hears about the Bermuda Triangle, and they have an impression as to what they think it is that they're flying into. And you knew you were going to be facing what you believe is this Bermuda Triangle that's sitting out there. What was your predisposition as to what this thing is that you're flying into?
You mean, what did I know about it before?
Yep. Yeah, what did you know about the Bermuda Triangle before you took off and actually flew into it?
Right. Well, I didn't know that there was an area known as the Bermuda Triangle, or it was known, but by very few people. I did know one thing, though. I had two mentors that I worked for, and they were both pilots. Their names were Ford Carter and Don McKinney. They were brothers. And Colonel McKinney was an Air Force pilot, career pilot, retired from the Air Force, but he was an incredible pilot. He's the one that I really looked up to. And he actually was the backup B-29 bomber for General Doolittle when they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. And he could fly through anything, and he had been through hurricanes even in the eye. And so he and his brother had a really strange experience near Andros Island. And that was around 1965 or so, right when I first started flying. And then I flew for 5 years with them back and forth to the Caribbean. And we'd go to lunch. We worked in the real estate business. We'd have some lunches downtown. Every now and then, him and his brother would start talking about this storm that they encountered. And I could tell there was something really strange going on, because they would both get really excited about it and try to explain it, and they really couldn't explain it. And they were flying two different airplanes, and one was down low, twin engine. The other was Colonel McKinney was up in a jet with the DuPonts. And his brother told him there's this weird cloud laying right on the surface. He can't go under it. He's going to see if he can go around it. And so they came up on it with their jet. And they said, man, that is crazy. They said, we can't go over it either. It's so high up. And their jet can go up to 45,000. And Colonel McKinney explained it around, there was this strange ring around it, he said. And it was like, reminded him of the atom bomb, because he actually got to see go off. And the ring was rising up almost like an atom bomb, he said. But they flew around it. They were able to get around it and go to their destination, and the Turks and Caicos Islands. So that was I knew there was something strange in that area of Andros when they would tell that story. But that's all I really knew about anything strange in the area now known as the Bermuda Triangle. And like you said, it's like all pilots know about it today. And that's one of the controversies that I have with me working on it for almost 50 years now. Pilots still don't really understand what's out there as far as this electronic fog goes. And, it's caused lots of trouble with pilots, because airplanes are unforgivable. And even the Malaysian airline, I believe they got caught in the electronic fog, and look what happened to them. And then there's 1945, there was Flight 19, that 5 bomber planes from the Navy all vanished. And I believe they, too, were in the electronic fog. And then in 1927, the great Lindbergh, celebrating the 90th day, 90th year that he flew across the ocean right now. He had an encounter with it, and he wrote about it. And his was similar to the Malaysians' encounter. He was off of Cuba. He was only like 30 miles from where I went through this tunnel, and so was the Flight 19, only 30 miles from where I went through it. And Lindbergh explained in his last book that he tried to fly above it, and he couldn't get above it, which is strange, he thought. Then he figured, well, I'll fly below it. So he went all the way down to the surface of the ocean, and he couldn't get below it either. And that's because he didn't know it was attached to him. The same as Flight 19. They didn't know it was attached to him. The same as the Malaysian airline. They didn't know it was attached to him. And so all these pilots, especially like top commercial pilots that were in the Malaysian airplane, they don't think there's a fog that can attach to them. So they don't understand it. They think they're flying through this fog, and they're going to try to get away from it. But you can't get away from it. And that's why I tried to explain to pilots. Many of them are listening to this. If they ever get caught in it, they need to aim for a mainland. If it attaches to them over the ocean, don't make any turns. And if you do have to make a turn, only make one turn, and that should be toward the mainland. And then stay on that course because your instruments probably aren't going to be working. And if you're over the land, it's just the opposite. Aim toward a body of water, a large body of water like the ocean or the lake, a large lake or something like that. Apparently it will detach, just like it detached from me twice. I've experienced it over the ocean in 1970. When I reached the mainland, it detached. I didn't make any turns then. And I experienced this fog again over the edge of the Everglades in Florida Bay, which is an area where other pilots have encountered it also. And pilots have died, too, that have encountered it there. And so when I got over the Everglades, I had this fog, but it was only attached below me. So it was of a weaker variety and weaker intensity. But it formed an illusion in my mind because I didn't have my theory developed in 1996, and I thought I was flying over fog. And so I contacted the Miami radio, or not the radio, but the Miami Weather Center. And I asked them, how extensive is this fog? It looks like it's covering all of South Florida. Am I going to be able to make it to my destination, which was in Palm Beach County, like 100 miles away? And they said, what fog are you talking about? There's no fog reported anywhere in the state of Florida. We are clear in Florida. And so right then I realized something strange was going on here, but I still thought it was flying over this fog, so I thought it went on for miles. And then I got a hunch. I'm going to make a turn away from the mainland and aim for the ocean. And so when I made that turn, as soon as I made the turn, I noticed there was a hole underneath the cloud. And there's a artist computer illustration in my new book that shows what that hole looked like. And I'm not the only pilot that has experienced these strange holes in the fog. And I could see the Everglades below me going the same speed as me, 180 miles an hour. And I'm wondering, that's kind of weird. This is some kind of a phenomenon going on here that I'm not sure what it is, but it's happening. And then, so as I made that one turn and aimed for the ocean, the hole started getting bigger. And then it got bigger the closer I got to the ocean. So finally, when I reached the ocean, it got to the point where it had spread out so far that there was only this ring around the airplane. And I'm thinking that the ring is several miles long. And I'm wondering if all the other pilots are seeing it. And they weren't. And there was this strange gap in the ring. Wherever I looked through where the ring was, there would be a gap, like a gap in the clouds, or a gap in the land. If I was looking down toward it, if I was making a turn. And I believe, again, for the second time, I was seeing the fabric of time with that gap. Only now it was much less. Instead of many minutes going by in time and space, it was just seconds. I didn't notice any time discrepancies because it only would have been seconds.
You said something interesting, Bruce, and I want to ask you this before you go much further. You almost make it sound, and maybe I'm misunderstanding here, but you almost make it sound like you have the free will to detach yourself from this fog at any time should you be able to make a turn towards mainland. Is that correct or no?
That's right. That's what I'm trying to tell pilots in case they ever get caught in it, because there's been many pilots that go through a series of turns, and they're in a more intense variety of this fog. And in my book, I've got the 5 different categories of intensity that I list. And if you get in intensity 4, like I was in, the in the Bermuda Triangle, the instruments are not going to work, and your compass will slowly be rotating, and your radios may not even work. But they often do work, though, and like mine. But anyway, when you're in this fog, that's what you need to do. And the trouble is that, especially airline pilots, they're all highly trained, high-time pilots, and probably none of them, there are some that believe in it. They've contacted me. But, it's kind of like their job, too. They can't be talking about anything paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
And so they do not believe there is such a thing as electronic fog. They have absolutely no idea that something like that exists because they study pure science, mainstream science only. They don't study the paranormal. And they're not allowed to talk about it because they could lose their job.
Well, here's a little bit of my point here, Bruce. It seems like the way you're describing it, that this fog is almost sentient, it's trying to grab a hold of you as you're traveling. It's not only messing with you in that it seems like it's accelerating you as you're hydroplaning through it, but at the same time, it's trying to envelop you, or envelop you. It's almost trying to swallow you up, but at the same time, you have certain ways you can duck, dodge, and even bank out of it. So you do have a way to get out of it. So you've got a little bit of free will to escape it, but you only have limited opportunity. Is that the case?
Yeah, pretty much. It's like the Malaysian airline. If they would have just continued straight, not even made any turns, they would have reached the mainland of Asia, and I believe it would have detached from them at that point. But what they did is what many other pilots have done that get in this, and they went through a series of turns. And, like their first turn was probably toward the closest airport, but then they can't see it and can't navigate to it. And so they made like 3 or 4 turns, and at that point, with none of their instruments, their navigational instruments working, they lost direction. They probably didn't even have any idea which way north was. And so, just like Flight 19, they went through a series of like 7 turns. So they were totally disoriented. All they had to do was fly due west, and they ended up flying due east until they ran out of fuel. And the same thing as an airline. They just kept flying, and they didn't know they were over the Indian Ocean. They ran out of fuel.
What makes this fog detach? Do you have a theory? What makes this thing decide that it's done with you?
Well, my theory is that it's the atmospheric change of going from a large body of water to a large area of land. There's an atmospheric change when you do that, and that apparently makes it detach because it's like it doesn't want to form there. And I believe it forms in these tunnels, 2 miles high. And I've seen many of these tunnels, but not many quite as long as this one that I flew through. But I've seen one other that long over Grand Bahama Island. But these tunnels, they last about 3 minutes on average. And what's going on all around these tunnels, because they're usually 2 miles high, it's like the most intense part of the storm, and you can imagine what's going on all around the tunnel. There's updrafts, downdrafts, side drafts. There's lightning. There's magnetism. There's new things like antimatter being discovered in storms. There's dark matter. There's these strange forms of lightning that shoot out on top of the storm, 2 different types that they haven't identified yet, but they have great photos of it now, but they don't know what it is. It's got something to do with gamma rays. And so all this is going on around the tunnel while it's swirling, and that's what creates this electronic fog that has something to do with the fabric of space and time. And so when the tunnel collapses, it emits like a spear of this fog. And the spear is probably only maybe 100 yards in diameter, 100 yards or less in diameter. And if an aircraft or a boat, or it can happen on land, a car goes through it, it appears to attach itself to that vessel. And that's it can go up or down depending on whether there's downdrafts. It could go down to the floor, the land or the ocean. If it's a calm, it'll stay at the 10,000 foot level. If there's updraft, it'll go up to 60, 70,000 feet or higher. It can drift anywhere, and what makes it similar to other fogs is that it can last for many hours. But probably not more than a day, though, maybe a half a day before it would disintegrate or dissipate. So that's something I'm trying to get the word out to all pilots, but not just pilots, everyone, because I feel that this is just as important as a hurricane, or more important than a tornado, similar to lightning in importance, because it's going to help us in the future when we learn maybe how to harness the energy within this. It's a very powerful form of meteorology, and my hope is that someday it'll be a term just like similar to lightning.
You know, the way you describe it, Bruce, there's this thought that pops into my head, and I don't know, call me crazy for this thought that's popping into my head, but in the area that this fog exists, you know, a lot of people talk about the kingdom of Atlantis. And this fog reaches anywhere from sea level to, did you say it was 20,000 feet or higher?
Oh, yeah, I could probably go up to 90,000 feet. They're getting ready to set a record for a glider at going over 90,000 feet. That's with no engine, no propulsion.
Okay.
So there's go up to 90,000 feet.
It reaches very high. Yeah. So, and it seems to attach itself to not just planes, but boats or any type of vessel or vehicle that goes through it. And in your experience, you said you felt not only like you were traveling through something that wasn't quite just normal fog, but you also said you saw things that resembled time. Do you believe that you were traveling through something that might have been a portal, that was a built portal, something that was put there on purpose, maybe by a different civilization?
Well, it's possible. I mean, you could call it that. There's another theory that I questioned myself about the creation of this storm. I call it the time storm, the first big storm that I flew through that created this tunnel. The first thing I saw was the lenticular-shaped cloud, and I've read that there are things that are called the mothership. That's the cigar-shaped UFO. It's been around for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
People have seen it, and when they get close to Earth, they shroud themselves in a cloud so that you can't see the craft. And when I first started researching this in early 1970s, I discovered a book by a South American doctor that had taken photos with a telescope of the mothership up high, and probably many miles up, and it was pretty incredible. It was shaped like a cigar, and another good reason for calling it a cigar is because the shape of it was not perfect. It had like dimples in it, kind of like a golf ball, but the dimple was small. Some were a little bit different shaped. They weren't perfect. And then he also had close-ups of it, and there was like a hallway that could open up in this UFO, and coming out of the hallway was the classic shaped flying saucer. And anyway, this cigar-shaped UFO, I'm finding out from a guy named Joe McMonagle. We have a chapter all about him in the new book that he explains how he did it's called remote viewing of my experience.
Yep.
He's a famous psychic. He's written 4 books, and he has this incredible ability to see things with his mind. And one of the things that he did for us was, review what I experienced without ever knowing that he was going to be asked the questions. And what they do is they put it in an envelope, and then the question's in the envelope, and they tell him to answer it. You can't even see what's in the envelope. I found it to be true. He can really do that. But anyway, recently he's been doing some research on UFOs, and he found the mothership that I'm talking about, and he says that it's a living organism, the mothership, the cigar-shaped ship. It's alive, and it can travel throughout, who knows, the Milky Way, maybe even the universe, but it's some sort of creature that aliens have been able to work together with, to be able to fly to different stars. And they can control it. And it's almost like us going back in time and how we learned to control horses. And we could get all around a lot faster with a horse. So that's a similar analogy with this strange creature that it's so huge, it's capable of transporting people to different stars. And so that mothership could have been the lenticular cloud that I flew over. And it was getting ready, or it did, exit the Earth. And imagine how much power it would take for it to take off and go to another star. And so I just happened to fly over it when it was getting ready to take off. And it's kind of like a little airplane can get caught up in wake turbulence, swing-tip turbulence from jumbo jets, that can cause vortices that can destroy a little plane. And so it's possible that they were creating this type of exhaust that came from the mothership, and I just happened to get caught up in it. And the theory is, though, that if that's what happened, I don't believe it's all because of them. I believe that somehow it has something to do with meteorology. And they can use this form of, say, like lightning. They can harness this energy of electronic fog and create a takeoff from Earth to another star.
So you're of a mind that this isn't completely man and or alien made, that this is just a natural phenomena that's been manipulated, much like a HARP program of the stars.
Yeah, the mothership is a natural phenomenon that they have learned to manipulate.
Wow!
And they have their flying saucers inside it. It's so big. And it was not exactly, but just over a month later after I had that experience, flying through this tunnel that I was flying at night, and I flew over Miami, and for some reason I went to the same level, 10,000 feet, and it was a perfectly clear night, and I went over Miami, and then I headed offshore, due east, and I got about 5 miles offshore, and my passenger and I noticed a strange light, and it kind of reminds me of how Columbus reported a strange light that looked like a candlelight, he said. And it was kind of bobbing up and down and moving back and forth and making some odd movements. Well, that's what this thing was doing, and it was orange like a candle light, and all of a sudden, it makes an incredible course, a blast aiming right at us on a collision course. And the course was like the exact same course that I had taken to fly from the tunnel to Miami, in the same height. And I thought I was going to die. And just before it hit us, I made a real sharp turn to the left. And I remember while I was turning it, I thought, well, this is the end. I'm not going to be living anymore. And then when I looked at it, it just disappeared. It was gone. But it was a huge saucer shape, and I felt it definitely was metallic. That's why I thought I was going to die, because it didn't look like a light. I was hoping it just be like a reflection or something. I said, no, This was matte, and it had a dome on the top of it. It was close to 300 feet in diameter and 60 feet thick or so.
I'm curious, Bruce, in your experience too, as we're talking about this fog being a natural phenomenon being manipulated to, become a man-made phenomenon. If you believe that the same thing can be said of lenticular clouds, that lenticular clouds may be nothing more than just camouflage for a UFO, and if that's always the case, is that something you believe?
Well, if the lenticular cloud is hovering down low over the surface, yeah, that could be inside there, because the lenticular clouds don't form low like that. They're always high.
I saw, actually, Dave and I, years ago, we were out in Nevada, and we were going to meet up with the Ghost Adventures guys, and we saw, it was the first time I'd ever seen anything like this, and I guess it stuck with me, because as we're driving from Las Vegas north, this little low-flying lenticular cloud was following us up the highway. And I kept looking out the window, looking at this thing, and Dave goes, "Oh yeah, it's a lenticular cloud. It's probably got some sort of UFO behind it." And he kind of chuckles. And I kept staring at the thing like, really? At the time, I'm not knowing what to think, because, if it did have something behind it, why doesn't it just pop out and show itself? But at the second, but yet I thought to myself, that's really quite the clever thing. I'm having very simple thoughts about something that's so unusual yet awe-inspiring. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, if it wasn't on the lee side of a mountain, which is fairly typical and normal out west, where the mountains form. You're saying this thing was down, and that's up high, close to 10,000 feet or higher.
This was in the middle of a clear blue sky. There was not another cloud anywhere.
And no mountains.
No mountains, nothing. There was nothing in the distance. This was just a lenticular cloud that was sitting low and was following us up the highway.
So by low, you mean maybe only 500 feet or so?
Maybe 500 to 1,000, yeah.
Well, that's what this cloud was doing when I flew over it. So, yeah, I would say that odds are that there was a mothership inside that cloud.
And it was just the strangest thing. And you look up at it and you think, yeah. And the skeptic in you looks up at it and you think, it just could be odd random coincidence. And you try to bargain it away. But at the same time, you let your mind wander and you go, you know what? If it is, that's pretty cool. And then you start to go to the I guess the side of you that's the doom and gloom side, and you go, you know what? If it is, they could blow me away at any time, and I could be nothing but roadkill on the side of the road. It's just, have you ever had? You had that one incident where you thought, you know what, this is it. You're coming face to face with this thing in the middle of the sky. But when you go up in the sky, in a plane now, do you have that thought every time you go up that, you know what, if I run into something like this, I know that there's this fog out there. I know that I've run into things in the sky. Do you have that thought every time you go up that, hey, you know what, there's a hell of a lot more out there that I'm now aware of, that every time I go up may be my last time?
No, I don't think like that. I concentrate on manipulating the airplane. That's always the number one thought. But I'm instantly aware if I do get caught in something that could be electronic fog. That's only really happened to me one other time where I thought maybe it was the third time I was in this fog, and I was flying out west over the sugarcane fields where they burn the sugarcane, and these huge fires form, and heavy smoke goes up in the air, and it was a real cloudy day, scattered clouds, and so I just happened to enter right into the smoke from one of these sugarcane fires, and it hit me instantly, and I said, oh my goodness, this might be the electronic fog again, but because I went instantly to clear skies to IMC, they call it, instrument conditions only, which has happened to a lot of pilots. They don't realize what happened. They're being clear sky, and then this fog attaches to them instantly, and it turns into instrument meteorological conditions, and they can't see it all.
Bruce, I got one more question for you, and you know, it has to do with contact. To see it is one thing. To have some sort of contact is another, or to actually have some sort of sentient communication back and forth between beings is another. Do you feel like, one, you might have some sort of psychic ability, or did you have something where, as you're going through this fog, you might have gotten an impression from it? Like you knew why it was there, or that it actually called out to you, or you had an awareness of it?
Well, no, I don't really think I was aware that this was going to happen. And as far as psychic goes, it probably has affected me somewhat. It has affected me. It has to do with time. See, it's like I'm more sensitive to time now.
How so?
Well, there's occasions where I have actually seen the future. I mean, I can be like a visionary and try to predict the future by studying the past, trying to figure out what the future can be. But there's several cases where I saw a clear picture of a future event, and then weeks later, and sometimes months later, and even a few years later, that exact event took place. And I was able to see it, probably there's a gland in between your eyes and your forehead that can create visual pictures. And even with my eyes open, I see this visual picture. And then I memorize it because I know it's so unusual. And then it comes true. And I've even had some of those visions 100 years in the future.
What did you see that was 100 years in the future? Just to be curious, what is it like?
Well, no, I don't know what it's like that worldwide like that. The one vision that I've had is of a museum. I was inside a museum, and I was watching a demonstration. It was like a holograph, and it showed my plane and how it took off from Andros and went through the time tunnel vortex, I call it, and then traveling through time in space to Miami almost instantly. And there was a bunch of people watching it, kind of like in New York Museum of History. It was behind glass. But it was this big holograph that demonstrated how the event took place. And I was really pleased because there was a lot of people, a lot of kids were watching it. And then I looked at myself and I saw that I had no body. And then I realized that, this is way, way in the future. And I was gone.
So do you feel like that was, when you looked at the future, that was an out-of-body experience, that maybe you astrally traveled to see it? Or do you feel like it was more of a remote viewing experience?
Probably remote viewing, I would think.
Okay.
But an astronaut, like traveling somehow, but my body not being visible. It kind of scared me when I first noticed it.
I suppose it would, yeah. Yeah, I'd be a little frightened, yeah, especially going to the future. Although that's intriguing to be able to go to the future and be able to see. I mean, is it something you feel like you could, get a hold of Joe and maybe try to harness a little better? Is that something that it kind of tickles your fancy and you want to refine?
Well, I might be interested in it, but I don't communicate with Joe that much. And he's kind of an unusual guy. He when he did the remote viewing, one of the things he did was he's a good artist with a pencil and sketching, and so he actually drew the UFO that I almost had a collision with, and it was perfect. He had the dome on it and everything, showing it coming right at me. But it had like two fins on the back of it, almost like jet tails. And the one I saw didn't have that. And so I met with him once down in the Keys. He stayed at a house I had down there, and I took him out fishing. It was the first time I met him, and I was kind of concerned, spend the night with him. I thought maybe he was kind of a weird guy, but no, he was just perfectly normal. But he did one unusual thing. He comes up to me after later at night before we're going to bed. I could see he was upset, kind of shaking almost. He was so nervous. And he said, "That UFO, Drew," he said, "it didn't have those jet tails on it, did it?" And I said, "Well, yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, no, it didn't have that. But everything else was perfect." And he was all upset. He said, "Damn, I don't know why I drew those damn tails on there." So I thought it was kind of funny, but he made a big deal out of it. So then I had all the details that he had written for us about his remote viewing. And, of course, the one was with the UFO with the tails on it. And so it was like a year, almost 2 years later, I'm reviewing my files on his work that he gave us. And I look at the rendering of the UFO that he sketched, and it didn't have any tails on it. They were gone. So, I couldn't believe that. I was like, I was thinking there's something wrong with my mind. Did he send me revised ones? But he didn't. Somehow he made those tails disappear remotely without even erasing them himself. Mentally, somehow, he physically erased them. And then, so just recently, my co-author, Rob McGregor, asked on their go about what I just told you. And he said, "How did you do that, Joe?" And I knew this was going to happen, and I knew what Joe would say. So what do you think he said?
What do I think he said? I think he said that he saw them in his mind and he made them disappear.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that's what I figured, but that isn't what he said.
No?
He said he wouldn't comment on that.
Just said he wouldn't comment.
Would not comment on that.
Huh. Interesting. That doesn't creep you out a little bit? A guy who's been in your house and you've been fishing with and stayed the night said, well, I'm not going to comment about how I snuck in and took the tails off your drawing? Or took the fins off your drawing?
No, he wouldn't comment on it. I don't know. I figured, hey, it's so amazing. It probably amazes him that he's capable of doing that. And so he'd rather not even talk about it because he really doesn't know how to tell you what happened.
I don't know. Maybe he found a way to go back in time through viewing and remember to tell himself to not put them on there. Who knows?
Yeah.
Very interesting. Bruce Gernon has been our guest. He's the co-author, along with Rob McGregor, of Beyond the Bermuda Triangle, True Encounters with Electronic Fog, Missing Aircraft, and Time Warps, available right now on Amazon.com. And as Bruce mentioned, there's an audio book. It's being commissioned right now, or is it out there already, Bruce?
Yeah, it's on Amazon, and it's already getting some reviews, and they're saying it's really, really fantastic.
Excellent.
The audio.
Excellent.
I listened to the production of it, and I was really impressed. That whoever the narrator is, he kind of makes it exciting. It's almost as if I'm telling the story, but he can put like more emotion into it than I would be able to do. So it's pretty interesting.
Very good. The website, check it out, electronicfog.com. Electronicfog.com. That's where you can learn more about Bruce and Rob. Bruce, thank you very much for joining us tonight on Beyond the Darkness.
Okay, Tim, thank you. It's been great talking with you.
Thank you. Folks, we'll be back again tomorrow night. Tomorrow, Barry Strom joins us, and we'll be talking about a project that he's working on where, believe it or not, Barry is chronicling the lost years of Jesus. And you're not going to believe how. That's coming up tomorrow right here on Beyond the Darkness. For Dave Schrader, I'm Tim Dennis. We'll see you tomorrow, folks. Have a great day.